kettle of fish than what the consumer is thinking and doing and acting on. Somebody mentioned, well, Costco, for instance, has a very, very strict set of business requirements that you absolutely have to abide by, and they don't fool around. And neither does Walmart. Of course, not many people in British Columbia are going to get in on the Walmart, or want to maybe get in on the Walmart sort of trade. But nonetheless, knowing what your business, what your customers' sort of needs are from an administrative standpoint, from commitment standpoint, contractual standpoint, and so on, is all part of market research. And then, of course, on the bottom, consumer research is part of this umbrella. So, this is our baby today, consumer research. And you'll notice that I keep sort of repeating the same sort of lines here. The systematic gathering and recording and analyzing. This is, and by systematic I mean, if you're going to do this right, you need to establish a set of procedures to do it with, and we'll show you some resources on where to get that. And then repeat that again the next time you do it, rather than reinventing the wheel every time you want to make a change in the marketplace with your product. Systematic is the key word there. Specific to your target market. You don't have to spend a lot of heat and light trying to find out what other people are doing. Only the people that you want to sell to. Now remember, keep in mind that we're not talking about a commodity world here where you're trying to sell to anybody and everybody. So, consumer research, and there are more than these three, but just to give you an example of them. Demographics, this is where you can start to find your specific quantitative statistics on your target markets. You may even want to start here to decide who your target market is going to be or what your target market is going to be. And then you can drill down into end user segmentations. Families with children, women 15 to 50, Muslim food buyers, Asian food buyers, seniors. And then the last one, of course, is the big one. Consumer research, it's really its core objective is to determine buyer behavior. And if you can get a good handle on that buyer behavior, it'll sort of put you most of the way down the track to producing a product that is going to sell in higher volumes and hopefully at higher margins. So those are, we differentiated again. The customer, the consumer, can be two different people. Market research is the big umbrella, and consumer research is a part of market research. So there's one more. Now, you probably wouldn't be here today if you didn't see value in doing consumer research, I would imagine. That'd be true? So, again, maybe putting too fine a point on this, but here is where I had some first-hand experience with this particular phenomena in the business incubation field. And developing a new widget is no different than developing a new food product at all. And so many times I saw this sad story where someone thought that they knew what the market would buy, and it didn't turn out to be true at all. And when I say that, it's not a total yes or black and white type of thing. They just didn't sell enough product to cover their costs, and they went out of business. And the statistics today are still the same. 80% of new businesses fail. Do you know why 80% of businesses fail? Anybody?
Lack of research?
Well, yes, that was the obvious answer to that. But it's a trick question, because the number one reason that is sort of stated or published is lack of money, running out of money, or not starting with enough money. In other words, it's a lack of finances. Now, there's one thing to start without a lot of money or not enough money. That's kind of an obvious one. But suppose you felt that you were well funded and you had the ability to get old Uncle Jim to lend you $100,000 to start to get this new product into the marketplace, but you hadn't done any research on it and you thought you knew what the market would buy. That's where a great deal of that 80% comes from. They think about half of the failure rate is because of that. Entrepreneurs fall in love with what they invent in their basements and they will not listen to anybody until it's too late. So that's kind of the core idea behind this one. So I want to tell you a couple of little stories here. Obviously, it's a risk reduction technique also. It's all about making sure that you stay in the game. It's kind of like the casino or the stock market. You don't want to get caught betting too big when the odds are against you. So doing good consumer research before you start investing significant amounts of money is a dandy risk reduction technique. And again, as it says here, it doesn't eliminate the risks, it just reduces them significantly. So again, the 80% of small businesses starting up fail in the food business, agri-food business. The latest statistics are that 40% of new food product introductions don't go anywhere, but 75% of new food introductions that are successful are backed by significant market research and consumer research. So I think you can tell from that. You don't have to take my word for it. Here's a couple of interesting little anecdotes, and I think you know at least one of them. Everybody remember the 1985 New Coke fiasco? I think some of you do here. In 1985, Coca-Cola decided that they needed to beat Pepsi. And they went out into the market, they developed a new formula, actually a modification of the old Coke, and they called it New Coke. And they did a lot of consumer research on it, but it was all taste test based. You remember the Pepsi, or was the Coke Challenge or the Pepsi Challenge and so on? They were so thrilled with the fact that the majority of taste testers preferred the New Coke taste. 3 months they had to go back to the old formula.
Sugar and diabetics?
Good guess, but that wasn't it. Today,
Never give the consumer a choice of what they want.
that's true too, yeah. True too.
Yeah, the brand change. People just know brand changes, even taste changes.
Yeah, Phil, that's right. That's closer. That's closer to. Right. So that's right. The logo changed, but here's the most interesting part. They missed totally, and a lot of heads rolled because of this in the marketing department. They did not consider the nostalgic aspect of the mystery of the old Coke recipe. That there was a tremendous number of Coca-Cola drinkers who had it in their subconscious mind that they were using a product that had a secret recipe and that it would never be divulged, and that was sort of the reason for the success of this. And once that was violated, that segment of their marketplace collapsed, and they had to really scramble and bring something back. They brought the old recipe back with the name Coca-Cola Classic. So there's a good example of the professionals kind of missing the boat because they thought they knew what the market wanted based on the limited research they did. And they went ahead and didn't do a very thorough job. Here's the other one that you may not know about, and that is the Arch Deluxe hamburger. They didn't even call it a hamburger. McDonald's made a very similar mistake, costly mistake, and it was even more. It was $400 million mistake. Because salads had caught on at McDonald's, their marketing people sensed or thought, without doing any research, that there was a place for a sophisticated hamburger in their lineup. So they went ahead and they introduced the Arch Deluxe without enough research, consumer research, and it was a total flop. In fact, one of the things that made it a total flop was the promotion that they did was all around kids shunning this particular hamburger. It was like negative, I don't know, Mary, negative advertising in a way, I guess. So they thought that that would impress the adults, and this would bring more adults into McDonald's. But they confused the marketplace, and it was a big flop. And after it was all the dust settled, and they actually canceled this after a while, they found out that it was the main driver of their marketplace was convenience. And it was convenience built on a foundation of younger people, of kids, and that there was really the idea of a sophisticated food, promoted as a sophisticated food product at McDonald's, just did not fit their target market at all. So they kind of missed on that particular, the convenience aspect of it, and also I think the fast food business revolves around trusting that you're going to get the same thing at the same place all the time, consistency, and so on, and they kind of violated that. That's my assessment of it anyway, but the point being that even the big guys can miss on these things. And maybe they do too much, they make it too complex. So, all that said, just to kind of wrap this section up, how are we doing for time? Good. The process is the same whether you're introducing a new product or you're changing, for some reason or other, an existing product. And this whole business of repositioning an existing product is a lot easier, actually, than introducing a new product, believe it or not, because you already have a tremendous amount of experience and information. You should have anyway. So your own, I guess, business statistics, your own records, the data that you have already can form sort of a foundation for where you go from here. Whereas if you're introducing a brand new product, it's a kind of a different ballgame altogether. It's even more difficult to do things like focus groups, which we'll talk about in a minute, because a lot of people can't imagine what this new product is going to be like. Particularly food is one of the big differences with food marketing and any other kind of marketing is food. Everybody in the world eats food, and we have an emotional attachment to food. Most people do, to some degree or other. And the dynamics around how people decide on a new food product are different than how they would decide on a new cell phone or a flat screen TV or a car or whatever. The only thing that's, I think, closer maybe to food is clothes. I don't know. So food certainly makes the world go round. And risk management, again, it's important that you always have in mind that you have to use your limited resources as effectively as possible. And the worst thing you can do is jump to some conclusion about something you heard or read and rush a product change or a new product into the marketplace without doing your due diligence and doing your homework. And here's the bottom line, of course. Isn't that what we're trying to do in our businesses? We're trying to create a competitive advantage by adding value.
The problem with that is if they didn't like the color of my socks tomorrow,
So, just before the break, one more set of definitions. And it is between primary and secondary research. Now, I know, no, you're getting a feeling this is getting a little complex? Well, it is, but it's kind of necessary for you to understand these differences before you start to work on it, or you can kind of go off on the wrong foot. Now, I'm starting with secondary research here. That kind of sounds funny, I imagine, but the reason I'm starting with it is because it's probably something that's not going to be of a lot of use to you, and I just want to sort of get it out of the way for better reason than that. So secondary research involves information that others have already done, and it's been published in one place or the other. And I mentioned the halal foods in British Columbia, a big growing sector, believe it or not, as is the Asian sector, because of our immigration policies and the attraction of the province and so on. So if you were going to do some, sheep, lambs for the halal market, and you were just starting out, suppose you were going to start that kind of a ranch, you'd probably want to know how many of those Muslim buyers, how big's the market in British Columbia. And you can find that out in a number of places. Obviously, the Muslim Association of BC, I checked their website, and sure enough, they'll tell you exactly how many Muslims there are in British Columbia and where they are. So that's an example of secondary research. And these are the best two places to get the secondary research: Statistics Canada and the Internet. And we all know how to do that now, don't we, with Google and what's the other one? Anyway, some of these are still useful but sort of by the day they're getting less useful at all. Although government agencies are still, the Ministry of Agriculture in British Columbia does a decent job of keeping track of the industry, and however their numbers seem to be always a year or two behind. So the more current information you can get, the better, obviously, especially if you're going to take a risk and develop a new product. These are good in a lot of cases if they're specific. This is something that isn't used a lot in the food business because a lot of the list manufacturers, and these are companies that produce mailing lists and emailing lists, and you can kind of break down the names that you want out of the list. If you're going to do a survey, if you wanted to only maybe send your email survey to people who have eaten at fine dining restaurants. If you needed that information, you can get that. But there's a cost to it, of course. And we mentioned this one before, from your own business records. If you've been selling a product or a line of products before, that's a great place to look if you know how to organize the information and so on. And here's our favorite. This is what we came here for today, and that's primary research, which means really that it is research that is specific to your product, but it's coming from the horse's mouth, to use an agricultural term. Or is that a horse racing term? I don't know. My example here is if you were going to change your soft drink line, you probably better have some taste testing done. Now, you hearken back to the Coca-Cola Pepsi thing there. You got to be a little careful with what you're getting from that, but it's all in the way you ask the questions, and we'll get into those survey questions a little later. So that might give you everything you need right there. Sometimes simple is better in primary research. And analyzing the information becomes more complex the more questions there are. Now, on the checklist as to which are consumer research and which are not, let's take a look at the first one, identifying the number of families with small children. Now, that is purely a market research question from the standpoint that it is actually asking for secondary data, and it does not address consumers directly. The second item, conducting exit interviews outside of a supermarket, is an absolutely a consumer research type of item, except for the fact that if there is no engagement with the consumers who are coming out of the supermarket, then it's questionable whether it's consumer research. And as is number 4, dropping down to number 4 for a minute, giving out samples at a local food fair, if that's all you did and the people walked away without any feedback, then you're not really conducting consumer research. You're not getting any information back at all. The volume of beef bought by your local hospital, that's quite an obvious market research question. It's not going to give you any particular information as to what consumers of beef prefer, although it gives you a hint at what sort of beef volume is going through the hospital. And the last one, of course, asking shoppers to taste test. The key there are the words asking shoppers and having them fill in a questionnaire. That's a pure consumer research question as opposed to a marketing research question.
Agreed, but I think you have to be more specific in questions to get to the answer that you want.
Exactly. Again, that's sort of the reverse of the other little trick question that we just talked about. If you just simply observed the buyer behavior and you were making, on your clipboard, you were just saying, okay, that person took my product, that person didn't, and that's all you did, that's more market research. But if you ask these people afterwards, if you observe them and then ask them like you did, why, and so on, why is the big word, that's consumer research.